On page 27, so this is when the overlords are starting to start to control the earth and make it a better place. He says here that with the arrival of the overlords, nations knew that they need no longer fear each other, and they guessed, even before the experiment was made, that their existing weapons were certainly impotent against a civilization that could bridge the stars. So at once the greatest single obstacle to the happiness of mankind had been removed. So he's saying here that the greatest single obstacle to happiness is warfare. Right on the next page, this is on page 28. This is about the ambassador to the aliens, and it says, he had reached the position that neither personal possessions nor official ceremony could add anything to his stature. So consider when you're rising in your position, your designations, your who you think you are. How important can you possibly be as a human being? We might think that our current example of that might be the Pope. The Pope is apparently the closest to God, if you believe in that stuff. And where could the Pope go to get more renown, right? At least renown from his believers. Nowhere. He is at the highest he could possibly be. Consider then, so that's a religious context. Consider a secular context. You could be, where else could you get the most renown from? You could be a president of a nation, let's say, that's pretty highly renowned. But what if you were the ambassador to a superior species? That has got to be the highest you could possibly be for that kind of context. So on the next page, on page 29, this is about the aliens visiting the Earth and the impact. So it says here, they felt with good reason much as a cultured Indian of the 19th century must have done as he contemplated the British Raj. The invaders had brought peace and prosperity to Earth, but who knew what the cost might be? History was not reassuring. Even the most peaceable of contacts between races at very different cultural levels had often resulted in the obliteration of the more backward society. This is a great point. Consider the New World context, but consider also today. Consider where there's what are called Aboriginal cultures, so Native Americans, so that their descent is not European, or at least most of their descent is not European. Those cultures meeting each other and trying to coexist becomes very difficult, especially when they want money from the invading culture, so to speak, which is a problem in Canada. How can you possibly have people who would like to exist as they used to, but take public money from their invading culture, from the invaders, so to speak? It's not possible. But this is what happens when you have cultures that meet each other. You get a kind of isomorphism. If it's allowed, the superior culture will start to take over. Superior can mean many things. It can be monetary, it can be arts-based, such as a greater, more interesting culture, more music, and more just better music, or more interesting music, or it can be just show of force, military. All these things can be can impact and destroy a more backward, as he calls it, a culture. So the next quote I have on page 69, he says here, this is a quote from an overlord. He says, all political problems can be solved by the correct application of power. So I thought that was you could discuss that for a long time, because of course he's saying that the crucial ingredient in all political activities is a use of power. So let's take the very fundamental basis here. Politics has to do with how we organize ourselves as a group. To organize people as a group, you can either, and some people might even disqualify this, can you say that a group is based on just kind of an anarchistic principle of just people form with a free association? Is that a political entity? Is that a group? Well, you might say that they're only together for a certain purpose, and then that's it. A political kind of a group is, I guess what's suggested here, is only when there's a hierarchy or a leader which directs the group. And the group's association may not be free. If that's the context, then he's saying here that any problems that arise with this forced association, if that's the context we're working in, forced association, any kind of problem that arises in that, it's only solved by what he calls the correct application of power, in a sense that when you have a forced association, you have an implicit power group, and now the only way to make that power group work better, however you define that, must be through using power in a better way. So in a sense that political problems are created or based in a misapplication of power, maybe a corruption, for example. So if we're in a context of forced association, which basically the entire world is, then the only way to solve these problems is through the hierarchy, through the governing structure. Because the governing structure, if there's any political problems going on, is misusing their power. And so I guess from the aliens' perspective, in terms of a benevolent use of power, their power is what makes things either good or bad in a forced association.